Good evening, everybody. I am Ms. Shwetambari Borade, moderator for this evening. Welcome you all on behalf of Shan and Kakachi Engineering College, Mumbai, India. We at SAKEC Research Cell would take this opportunity to thank each one of you present here today for this hybrid webinar series, Innovative and Emerging Technology in the Field of Research, which is hosted in collaboration with over 25 plus national and international partners. I would like to specially make a mention of our international collaborator, the University of North America, to make this webinar happen. With great pleasure, I would like to introduce to you our first speaker for the evening, Dr. Peter West. Dr. Peter West is a Vice President of North America Sales at Core Wireless Specialist in IoT and eSIM implementation, Virginia. Dr. West is responsible for academic operations, including faculty and instructional oversight, academic support services, new program development, ensuring institutional effectiveness and assessment for improving, ensuring compliance with accreditation criteria, and helping to create and sustain a collaborative educational environment for the University of North America. Prior to joining University of North America, he was the Dean of Academic Affairs at the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale, and Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs for Colorado Technical University, and has been on the faculty and served as an administrator for the Northern Illinois University. Dr. West has bachelor's degree and master's degree from the University of Wisconsin and a doctorate from Northern Illinois University. Now I hand over to you, sir.
Good. All right, thank you very much for that nice and kind introduction. Good evening to all of you who are listening and viewing this in India. It's certainly my pleasure and my colleagues' pleasure to be with you today to discuss a little bit about, anyway, I was invited to discuss a little bit about the U.S. System of higher education. What I'd like to do this morning is talk a little bit first about a brief history of education, higher education in the United States, then talk a little bit about what it is today and what I believe it will be tomorrow. I think we're kind of on the verge of a transformational period in higher education. Obviously, with the serious COVID-19 pandemic that we're witnessing throughout the world today, that's changing the face of lots of things, not the least of which is higher education. So let me start with a little history of the higher education in the United States. So higher education in the United States really began back in the 1600s, revolving around religion and religious education. It was important for settlers of the U.S. to train ministers, to get them to learn how to read, to get them to learn how to interpret the Bible. For their and the religious documents for the citizens of the United States. It kind of evolved from there and went into more of a liberal arts thing. It was very small, I will say. The first college or university in the U.S. was Harvard University. Most people have heard of Harvard. It's very prestigious. It's well known internationally. But then smaller schools began popping up throughout the country. Eventually, revolved around liberal arts primarily, mathematics, reading. Can't believe mathematics and reading. And then it went from rural and an agronomic society to more of an urban society. So people had to get more into an industrialized type of nation, and they needed that kind of a training. Today, there are basically four different groups of higher education institutions in the country. One is our community college group, our two-year schools, two-year community colleges. That primarily provides students who enter them with a career-focused education. The second group of higher education institutions in the country is the more liberal arts or the four-year colleges. and they prepare students for a foundation in the liberal arts. The third group is the larger group, which most of you are probably familiar with, and those are the larger research-based institutions and universities. They do a lot of research. They're land grant institutions. They're big state institutions, of which I was a professor for many years at Northern Illinois University. And then finally, the fourth group is the for-profit schools. Those are for vocational education. Those are for career education. There's a lot of them in the country today as well. But those are the four groups that you typically will see in the country today. Now, some of you may or may not be familiar with the school that I'm currently affiliated with, the University of North America. It was introduced a little bit, but one of the things we focus on is applied learning. Now, applied learning really means one thing. We prepare students for occupations and careers. We want them to understand what they need to be successful tomorrow in their industry today. So what you learn in our college on a daily basis is what you can apply in your job site the next day. It's really kind of an applied learning thing. And I think we are going to see a huge transformation in higher education in the next couple of years. It's going to be changed dramatically. And here's how I think it's going to be changed dramatically. And primarily, it will be changed because of the current situation we find ourselves in terms of COVID-19. Everybody's been having to shelter in place. Universities have had to take their curriculums off campus and onto an online environment, as we had to do as well. So here's what's going to happen, I believe. It's going to change higher education dramatically. One, it's going to reshape the curriculum as we know it. It's going to go from more of a liberal arts and philosophical curriculum to more of a job-focused curriculum. Second, it's going to become much less expensive. Today, I'm very much afraid, and I'm saying this as an administrator in higher education here in the United States, but I'm very much afraid that a lot of the schools currently in business in the United States are going to go bankrupt. They're going to go out of business. And here's why I say that. Universities and colleges are indeed a business. They're in business to make money. They have to make money. It's very expensive. It's an expensive endeavor to run a university today. They have to pay professors. They have space that they've got to pay for. They've got buildings that they've got to maintain. They've got a huge staff that they've got to maintain. So it's very expensive. And right now, those universities have zero revenue. The revenue that they've had in the past technically has come from student tuition. And those student tuition dollars are no longer available to them because those students aren't on campus, living in the dorms, buying things at their bookstore, going to their cafeterias. So it's kind of a difficult situation for a lot of schools. And a lot of them are going to be struggling somewhat financially as we move forward, as we can continue to move out of this pandemic. So I think those are some of the things you're going to see that's going to change the face of higher education as we know it in the United States today. So what else do they need to do to move forward? And we're doing it right now. I think you're doing it in India as well. Higher education institutions need to embrace technology. We're doing it right now with these online learning environments that students seem to find themselves in. This is a perfect example. This webinar that we're participating in today. We need to create more action-based models. Research-based models is going to be very important. We need to understand the role of business in society. To be more competitive, students need to be more competitive. They need to take a more systematic view of what it is they're learning and how it is they're going to apply that learning once they get out into the workforce. And then finally, and I always suggest that to students who are graduating from our institution, just because you graduate does not mean that learning should stop. It's not necessarily an end to your learning experience, but rather a beginning to your learning experience. So lifelong learning is very important. Every profession has it. I think I'm addressing an engineering school right now. Engineers always have to keep up with the keep up with the industry through certification programs and continuing education. So does medicine, so does law, so does education. More and more and more, we're going to see that lifelong learning is going to be very, very important to the future of education. We can't just stop once we receive that 4-year degree or that graduate degree. I hope that makes some sense. So finally, I wanted to take a couple of minutes and talk to you a little bit about our institution. Our institution at the University of North America provides international students with some great experiences. Now, we all know that there are some really good universities and colleges out there, not only in the United States, but worldwide. I'm confident, I'm convinced of that. There are some very good schools out there. I like to think that we're a good school too. And what sets us apart is a number of things. I've already mentioned our applied learning, which is really going to be a transformative kind of concept in the world of higher education in the future. But also, one thing about the University of North America that we're doing that a lot of schools don't do is our faculty bring two things to the classroom. One is academic credentials, which is pretty typical. Every college or university requires their faculty to have those academic credentials, which allow them to teach that particular subject area. They could have either a master's degree or even a doctoral degree in their particular area. But in addition to those academic credentials, and this is very important, not only for our school, but for many schools, they bring industry experience to the classroom. And by that, what I mean is they're often practitioners in the industry in which they're teaching. If they're teaching accounting, they might be a certified public accountant here in the Washington, D.C. area. If they're teaching technology, they might be one of the directors of technology. Cybersecurity, they might be heading up a cybersecurity program somewhere. So it's very important from a standpoint of learning that you have an instructor who knows and who has experience in the field, and not only just experience, but current industry experience to help you understand what it will take to be successful in that field going forward. The second thing that sets us apart is our curriculum. Our curriculum really focuses on the student. The student is all important to the University of North America. And what you will do here is you'll see that what we do is we try to be as student-centered as we possibly can. Sometimes higher education is not easy. We all know that. I know that. Everybody knows that who's gone through higher education. So what we do is we try to provide as much support to the student as we possibly can in order to have our students be successful. If you're struggling, if you've got challenges, if there are obstacles in your way, and every college or university is going to have to do this going forward into the future, it's going to be important that you have the support system around you that we can provide you at the University of North America. So why is it important? Why is it a benefit for international students to come to the United States? Why do you even want to come to the United States to study? A couple of reasons. Now, again, there's good universities in countries all around the world. I know that. But a couple of the reasons, if you want to come to the States to study, you get some additional benefits. You get the opportunity to improve language skills. You get the opportunity to get a fairly decent world-class education, I like to think. You get the opportunity to experience an opportunity to go into a career field here in the country. So it's an opportunity for you to immerse yourself into the culture, into a different culture. Like it or not, we're a worldwide institution now. We're a diverse institution. We have students from all over the world. So it's very important that our international students understand what the benefits are in terms of academic opportunities, career opportunities, language opportunities, and multicultural opportunities. It's basically a global perspective, and you're going to receive a world-class student support as you come to the institution here in Washington, D.C. So I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and give you a brief overview of the types of education there is in the United States, a history of the education in the United States, who we are as the University of North America, and what we can provide for international students. As I said earlier, one thing that really is nice about our institution, and I've been to a number of institutions in my career, from the University of Wisconsin to Colorado to Florida to Illinois and now here in Washington, in the Washington D.C. area, is this is a very diverse institution. We have students from all over the world, not only from India, but from China and other countries in Asia, Thailand, Mongolia. We have students from South America and from Africa and from Europe. And yes, a number of domestic students from the United States as well. So I think that hopefully will give you just a fairly good and a very brief background and understanding of what education in the United States looks like and what you can expect if you really wanted to come here to study in the United States with either our institution or with another institution. Now, one thing I always like to tell students, and that is education is very important. Once you get that education, nobody can take it away from you. It's something you will have forever. And I encourage you to get an education, particularly a postgraduate education, whether it's with us or whether it's with another institution. But I think education is so important. And I got to tell you, with the issues that are going on in the world today, not only in our country, but in the world, I really feel that education is the key to helping solve some of these challenges that we face as not only as a country, but as individuals. So thank you very much for your time. I look forward to hearing any questions you've got a little bit later. I guess I'm going to let Professor James Moses talk to you a little bit about project management. James?
Just a second, sir. Let me first introduce him to all my attendees first, and then
okay.
I'll hand over to him. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No.
So our next speaker is Mr. James Moses. He's an educator, academic leader, creative entrepreneur with more than 14 years of experience in project management, entrepreneurship, leading academic programs, advising small businesses, and developing trainings, marketing, and sales management programs at various institutions and companies. Previously, he worked as an independent project manager for over a decade in the areas of education, government, and nonprofit. Mr. James has focused on medium to large projects ranging in scope from 6 months up to 2 years with budgets exceeding $2 million. Mr. James is a talented instructor who had taught both undergraduate and graduate business courses for over 12 years at major universities in Hawaii, Virginia, Washington, D.C. He has worked over the past several years developing, reviewing, and teaching project management and entrepreneurship related courses. Mr. James is a consummate innovator and entrepreneur, successfully managed a renowned financial and law office as a consultant in Honolulu, helping with its traditions and business expansion, and had also run a fashion boutique in Hawaii, creating an opportunity for young fashion designers. Mr. James is a Rotary Club member in Hawaii chapter and PMP member in DC chapter. So with the expertise that he holds, I am sure we all will be liking to hear from him more. So now I would like to hand over to Mr. James.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for the introduction. And it's such a great pleasure to speak with all of you about a subject I'm very passionate about. But before I do that, let me share my PowerPoint that I created. It's a brief one. And this is something that I normally teach my students at the University of North America. It's a great. I watched your introduction video of the university. It's an amazing one where I see a lot of you are engineering students looking forward to a bright future. I always tell my students that there's nothing in the world that's going to inhibit you from future success. And the reason I fell in love with project management is not because it has certain core disciplines and aspects, but it's also something that changes your behavior modification. You know, in project management, it's temporary. It really makes you to understand that you have a start and a finish. There's no procrastination in project management, especially if you're a procrastinator, someone who has a lot of doubts. What am I going to do after my graduation? You really need to take a couple of classes in project management or read about it. It really gives you a good understanding that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So let me share. It's a very brief PowerPoint. I was wrestling with this. How am I going to talk to you guys? But looking at your video and seeing the enthusiasm that your university has to showcase an opportunity that lies within your grasp, I thought this will be something that I can tickle your interest in. So let me share my screen with you. Bear with me. So I hope you guys can see my screen now. And so you all know that from the University of North America, we have classes in project management. That's where I teach. But I really wanted to focus today on one thing. How do we use project management for innovation? That was my title, Business Startup and Innovation. Now, I will share with you a lot of examples as I continue with the small presentation. And one of the things that you will recognize is, even in from your university or in the United States, the most important thing that kind of separates you from others is how are you going to become an innovator? You can look at all the people who come and had many success in the United States or abroad in the world. They were innovators. They were ones who found a solution to a problem. They also knew how to look beyond the normal constraints. So in project management, you can see that in a business startup, a lot of times business fail mainly because they spend a lot of time very introspective, thinking about what is going to happen, how am I going to come up with an idea, what are we going to do. There's a lot of ifs and ahs and waste of time in the very beginning that you fail to understand. If you had given an understanding of a time, you would go beyond some basic questions. So I had this first slide. Okay, it's helpful when you have a startup because it helps you to focus on the individual task. That means from the start, if you're a startup and you are students in the engineering college, right now I'm sure you're working on many projects and maybe you have teams. This is where you're going to start thinking. We look at a lot of successful companies in the United States. They started in the dormitory, they started in the cafeteria, they started in the friends talking about ideas. And it can start right where you are in your university. And that's where you learn to understand. If you have a team, you will learn how to make the team to work for you right from the beginning when you have a business idea. When you are all by yourself, there's a limitation. And that's why I bring project management in this component. Project management can be a very big difference, as I wrote here, from a chaotic workflows and a harmonious collaboration. When I started my own business in Hawaii, I started mainly because most of my students challenged me. As I told you, I've been an academic dean in many institutions too. And one of the things when you are advising and talking to students, when they come from different countries, and also when they are in your class, as I am an advisor for the Master of Business Administration, as well as the undergraduate program at University of North America, students have always the question, can you do it, professor? You talk a lot about it. Therefore, I built my own business. And one of the things I knew that I didn't have much time, so I have to start creating a project for myself. And that's where you see that you need to have people to collaborate from the very beginning. So how am I going to structure my business? I have some of those questions. This is what I'm posing right in front of you, all of you here. What kind of organization I'm going to have? What are my goals? Is it going to be a very complex project that I cannot handle? And what am I expecting from the deliverables? Let me give you a little hint. I'm sure you are all very young. You may not remember in 2008, we had a global meltdown of a financial collapse. I don't think India was hurt much, but the United States, a lot of people suffered. I actually knew when I opened my business, when am I going to close my business? I shut my business in 2008, and the market crashed after a month after I shut down the business. I sold it at a profit. See, this is where the discipline comes. You know when to fold, when to hold. You're not the biggest problem with business startups is you become too married or too fall in love with something that you don't know when to give up. And that's something that project management will teach you. And you all know, as I told you, project management is temporary. It has three constraints, and three are, the cost, resources, and scope. So right from the beginning, it teaches you, if you're a business startup, an innovator, that you don't have endless money. You don't have your family giving you money. When you come to the United States and you go anywhere, leave your family's network, you know you got to fend for yourself. And you cannot be borrowing money left and right. I knew this very much. When I started my first business, my parents supported me. When I started my second business, I had to support myself. And that's where the things come that you need to understand that when you have the three constraints, you learn how to harness your creative energy. What do I mean by that? That means you know the limitations you have, you know how to think the next step. That is, if I'm innovating an idea, when I'm bringing something. Now, I know in my introduction, they came about the fashion industry. And when I opened my business, it was something, again, I did not have much experience. But when I opened it up, I had to find a methodology where I'm able to bring new thinking into it. And I'll try to touch upon it later on. And let me go to my second slide. This is what I was talking to you about. Project management tools help you to organize, plan, track, analyze data. And this you need as a business startup. If you can read research everywhere. They'll tell 90% of business startups fail. And I can tell you why it fails, because they may be lacking one of these areas. They have not organized, there's no planning, and they have no data in hand. They expect data to come somewhere down the road. It's not going to happen. You can find data right in the very beginning. And you also understand in project management, you know how to divide things in phases. The first phase is how you're going to understand that right from the scope building, what you have in your hand. What are you going to do with this? How am I going to find compliance? How am I going to build this place? Am I going to buy the building? Am I going to lease it? A lot of questions come, but they may not be the most important, because if you spend too much time, your creativeness will disappear, because you get burnt out. And that's why a lot of business fold. And good project manager, as I wrote here, team is motivated. You know how to get people to work with you, track, and you're free from distraction. See, in small startups and teams, as I wrote here, you have to remember you're juggling a lot of things. A lot of things are in your hand. So in my class in University of North America, we have a lot of students like yourself with the engineering background. We have people from finance, chemistry, arts. They come from very good schools, and they choose University of North America, as Dr. West mentioned, about the applied learning. That is hands-on project. And in my class, in the project management, you are doing a real project. And today, and this week is the last week of my class. And I'm amazed the kind of level students submit on real projects. They're able to open a real coffee house which has social distancing, able to open designing a project organization for people who may want to deal with social media and so on and forth. There's tons of those projects, and these projects have real life in them because they can become real projects. And the first phase they have is they're trying to find the compliance. What are the rules, regulations? What am I going to do? So it is very basic. So let me go to my second slide. So you see, in project management startup, you got to really understand, keep it with 4 phases. I'm always someone who like to keep it short. You don't have 10, 15 phases that it's going to be too long and you're going to forget where you started. So you try to understand first, let's have a clear vision. Define your goals and how you're going to succeed. Second, you're going to plan and how you're going to make this work and breaking down the work. That's important. My students create the work breakdown structure. After the proposal and the project plan, the work breakdown structure will certainly break everything down to a nitty-gritty part. And phase 3 is execution. You see this? This is a highly compressed project management that is needed if you have a group discussion, a group meeting with your fellow students right in your university, and you come up with a great idea. If you guys are going to talk with 10 phases, your semester would be done. You may be going on a holiday or vacation, so you're not going to have much control. Neither did I, because I know many of my partners had other things to do, so I had to bring them together. So one of the things that I could do is have 4 phases. The fourth one, we are opening the business. A lot of my students have open restaurants, food businesses. I had a student who actually designed and started a business, and the student was actually from Korea, and she started a doggy treat business. When she gave a presentation, everyone laughed, saying like, "Hey, what's the opportunity?" And actually, after graduation, the student was able to really start the business. But the fundamental part was keeping it all within the 4 phases, and it made it manageable. So that's why I'm introducing this part. And the framework, you know very well, even though you have 4 phases, you gotta really make sure you work on your scope statement. What am I gonna do? Because don't forget, when you're in a business startup, when you're an entrepreneur, and when you are thinking as an innovator, scope creep, things that will come inside. This is what I told you in the beginning. When you sit and start talking, a lot of people start talking so much, you are now added to your initial thought that your initial idea is no longer viable. It's not realistic. It does last a SMART goal. I'm sure your instructors taught you what is a SMART goal is, right? It has to be specific, manageable, achievable, and realistic and timely. And we have 10 weeks in the University of North America. And my students are able to go to the project management class, come up with an idea, come up with a project plan, and then translate it into the marketing business plan, which I also teach. And if they want, they are able to start a business. Most recently, I have a student who has started a fitness club right in the pandemic. And as Dr. West and others have mentioned, we had to change our whole focus. How are we going to bring people during this time to work and have an active lifestyle? You guys have a wonderful gym. I saw a beautiful picture. So are we building a great gymnasium and other facilities? If you come to University of North America, you'll see we have an awesome, beautiful campus. And there's so much space around you, you will never feel claustrophobic. And we have things around us, but you got to remember time has to be specific. Cost, resources, these are things that you have to put in perspective. These are not endless. As I was telling you, when one of my hobby was photography. When I was at like age 15, I just got anything I would get from my parents. So I thought in my life, hey, I own this business. And one time, my mom pointed out the fact, no, son, you didn't buy a single thing. This is not yours. So that was the day I realized and sold everything and said, I'm going to use my own money. Now, as an innovator and a developer, a lot of times you're going to find this in your life that you do need to have a good control of the resources that you have at hand. You're not going to have anything that walks down the road, and cost is going to be minimal. You have to really control your cost. Now, that's one thing that I have there as a risk. Risk is something that I teach my students. They create a risk registry because no one expected the entire global frame of business will come to a halt because of the pandemic. But are we able to still continue our operations? Yes, that's again innovative thinking. I think, as Dr. West mentioned, the university systems will change. We moved everything online in a short case and in a short order. And I'm actually managed the Moodle at University of North America, our online program. We were able to move very fast. That's mainly because the university, when it started, had anticipated the what if. You are engineers. You are going to a very good university back home in India, right? And that's something that you have to remember. The risk as engineers, you always ask this question: what if something fails? What if something doesn't happen? What if I have to substitute? These are the things that come in hand that you have to think about in as a business startup and as innovator. You can't just tell, which is very famous, let's resolve this when we get there. Those people will certainly fail, because you always need to know what you have at hand. You have to build your quality. Again, there's a quality document, a registry, which I have my students complete, because when you are going to start a business, quality has to start from day one. It has to be something not thought about at the end of the project. And then you have the communication and so on and forth. And this is again a simple project lifecycle approach I have in front of you. It's just something that starting the project, your organization and preparing, carrying out the work, closing the project. It's simple, 4 phases. I always run at 4 phases. Even when I give my presentation, I don't have my students have about 20 PowerPoint slides. I keep it 15 because we have a short span of attention, right? I'm not sure how many of you right now have fallen asleep. Who knows? But I always tell my students, you got to pay attention and take down good notes, because you never know what's going to happen. And I can share one more example of one of my students sitting in the class, last row. I thought the student never paid attention. And I had a very unique invitation to one of the very good hotels, and said, I'm going to open a business. Never told me what the business was all about. And as I entered the hall, I saw, wow, it had some people from Hollywood and other people standing there. And I thought, what's happening here? And as I entered, my student was there, talked about it and said, like, you know what, professor, you thought that I'm not wasting my time in the last row, but look at the books I had. I took copious notes of what you were talking in the class, and that helped me to start the business. I literally had no clue that he was starting a business. And it was one of the initial social media businesses that he started. And one of the things that he did share was maintaining the 4 phases, because he had tried to start a business for many years, but it all ended in the very first part. People keep talking and talking, but there's no end. Or if you talk too much, there's a lot of negativism creeps into it. Or again, another thing, your scope will no longer look like the initial. You're wasting your time and money. That's why many startups fail. The reason I brought this topic is because we love to see you guys in the US. We like to see you at University of North America. But you got to remember, just being a student, just going through a degree, having a diploma is not going to resolve your life. Because from day one you come, you're going to be an innovator. You're going to find ways how to redefine and recreate yourself. That's why this project component that I wanted to add in my presentation is it's for business startups and innovators. It's a big topic. I can't just talk about business topic startup in a short forum. Maybe another forum, it'll take me another forum to really give you the nitty gritty how to start a business. But starting a business is a behavioral modifier. That means your mindset has to change. A lot of students, when they come from a different country, it is not just cultural change. You got to also adapt yourself to a model which it really, really looks for your creativity. That means in my class, you're not going to be able to go to the internet and search and find out and say, oh, this is the answer, let me just plug in. It is from you. Who are you and how can you bring about your creativity? And that's what I wanted to share today. And this is again the 5 phases. I have the approach, initiate, plan, execute. Now I separated here the execution and the monitoring control as two different components there, because when your project, in some projects, it's better to have the monitoring and control a little bit separate. You got to give some time for it because you have a startup, you are doing some engineering product or a computer, especially when you have to test your software. And I'm going to share something. Many of my students end up creating apps, and they will really use the monitoring and controlling component very much. And I had the process and the 5 process initiating, which I just shared with you guys. And I'm not going to talk about the agile principles here, but it has its own component, because if agile has to work, it's one of the things that you'll find. It's basically, it gives you a very good development process. And I'm sorry, I just keep clicking on this, but you can see the simplicity, the art of maximum amount of work not done is essential. So I'm not going to focus on that because short of time here. I'm just going to talk about creating an app when you in a student project. Okay, this is exactly, I'm sharing what my student had created. So step 1, you can say they define the project, create a use case, creating a written definition. Now, the app, there are many students who created an app. One of them was, how do we get our university shuttle scheduled, and how students who travel or come from different places can get a shuttle ride and come to a university campus. And this is around a graduate student, which actually created and has a very successful business now. But the app, when they did, was they have to come up with a definition and idea, clearly spell out what is it, what will it do, and who the users were. The students were these students. And they had to really find out, is there anything? And let me just give you a little hint here. This app came at the right same time that Uber was releasing their app. There were some flaws in the Uber app, which our students did not like. So therefore, they wanted to create this app. And they had identified students who really understood the technical perspectives. So the team that we started to create was a really good team, which had the technical component as well as an artistic and a fundamental design group. So they both worked. So in project management, teams are very important. So they created a storyboard to create a rough sketch of ideas on Sketchpad. They used all those tools, and they now had to get access to the data, which you see very much. This is what I was talking to you about. The data is available in a university. How many of the students who are coming from little faraway places and would really need a shuttle ride? And they also determined that students not only use iPhone, they use Android phones. So also they may use some other phones that may not be very adaptable, even though they may have the Android or in Apple software, may not be very user friendly. But we need to get the data across that is readable by many devices. And you can see that right here. They did don't forget, 10 weeks. So that's why I wrote that. They had a prototype, and they also went around the school to check whether the design worked. And you can see again, agile, collaboration, transparency, and then they tested to market. So there are many examples like this right now. I have a class that at least I can say 10 to 15 projects, which I can easily say it's ready for the market. It can easily go, and only 2 or 3 people have done that. So that's another opportunity when you take your classes, University of North America, you will find a big difference. Uh, I have taught in bigger universities and so on places. One big difference is the applied learning, you really get to know what you're going to do with your hands and how you're going to make use of the opportunity. And that's a big, big plus. You are now looked at a very different way because you are someone who's going to produce a value to the economic growth. Maybe India or anywhere. That's what I'm trying to impress upon you when I have this project management for startup or innovators. The whole thought process was it is something that you have in you, a dream, a creatability, an idea. You can use project management principles to harness those thoughts and make it really workable. You can create an opportunity for yourself. You can see in the US or in India or in any other place how people have found ways to make things come alive. And that's the whole process. And before I finish, let me share the 3 classes that we have in University of North America. This is on the master's level, project management and performance. And we have these 3 classes, risk and quality. These 3 classes really form a foundation. But in all 3 classes, I would say that I do have a very clear guidelines of being innovative and creative. So thank you so much. It was a wonderful opportunity that you all gave us to share with you. And let me see if there's any other questions, or maybe I went over time.
So at this point, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Kirat Udeshi, who
Okay.
is the Director Regional Development of South Asia, and he'll also be there to answer the questions. So should I take the questions?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the first question is, do you always need to have any partners or collaborators for startup?
James?
Yeah, it's a good idea to have partners and collaborators because it helps you to be more creative. And as I told you, if you are a person trying to do it all by yourself, there are much chances that you may get burnt out very fast. So even when I started my own business, I started start a couple of times by myself, but I found out that things are going to go out of hand. So therefore, it helps you to have people as partners. And they don't need to be partners and by giving you resources or money. They could be brain partners. They're going to be the creative partners.
Okay. So the next question we have is, how do we evaluate project success?
Well, the project success based on your scope. You had a dream. You started right in the beginning saying, this is what I wanted to my company to be and produce itself. So I can give you many examples. When I had my business, I had not much experience. I said, like, this is what the business is going to be after 1 year. This is my revenue. Did I hit my targets? So you develop milestones. And every milestone that you reach is going to be something that you know you reached a success. If you cannot, then that's where you're going to end up as you have to rethink and say, why did I not reach my milestones? And you can find flaws. That's why in project management, the last component is lessons learned. See, lessons learned is always a good opportunity for you to evaluate what missteps you took down the road. If you were trying to, in a hurry, like crashing your project, then you would find yourself missing the boat wholesome at some point. So you had to also build the quality right in the beginning and say how you're going to evaluate. Yes, you're going to find, did you achieve the goal, the scope you just had, the goal you had at the very beginning.
So basically at the beginning itself, we can decide on some milestones, and if we keep on achieving each of those, that means we are succeeding in that particular plan. Is that right,
That's right.
sir?
Yes. My project, I had 4 years. I wanted to have my business only for 4 years. And a lot of people asked me, why should I keep why am I not running it? And I decided to sell. I had a lot of people saying, why are you selling it? Little did I know, in October, the market crashed somewhere down the time. If I had just held it a little bit, I would have lost everything. So that's the thing. Your project management disciplines you to know when you should have things and when you should let go.
I have this personal question, so let me put out here.
Yes.
Like you said that when the business was, when the market was about to crash, like the next month, and but you had already sold your business a previous month. So was that an insight that you have got about the market, or you just thought of selling it off? I mean, what was it?
Is the question for Kirit or for me?
No, for you.
No,
For
for
me.
you, sir. A personal note, I want to know. So, was it then experience that you had that you got in the entrepreneurship that you thought that the market is going to get crashed and you should sell off the business, or you just sold it off?
Well, that's a very good question. So this is one of the things I talk to my students in the class. I asked my students, can you guess what business I had? Not many people would guess because I ran a women's boutique. I have no experience in that, zero. I have a hard time choosing even clothes for myself. So where in the world am I going to have a women's boutique? But when I bought the business, since I did not have experience, I had a lot of criticism. So I went after my work, sat outside the business which I was going to buy, had a notebook, and I studied human. And I did 3 months of very, very detailed research, hands-on research, because I knew if I fail, I had 100 people saying, I told you so. So I had no excuse. So I studied that. One thing I learned was there was a changing demography, or the business demography in the United States. A lot of regulations, business regulations, things that were really hampering the growth of business. And I knew also at the same time, there were certain places that were opening up so badly, the real estate market opened so fast that we know it was out of control. I had students who graduated who were in charge of multi-million-dollar real estate business. They had no clue, but they were just spending money like they had. Well, you know very well something that goes high that fast is going to come and crash. So I thought, okay, 4 years, I'm not going to spend too much time. But yeah, you got to study a lot of those things within yourself to figure out where the determinants are, and it will understand the market.
Let me add a couple of things. I think, James, you gave a very good information. And I think what he is trying to explain is like one is to do a good homework before getting into the business, understand what is the business requiring, understanding the fundamentals, understanding the pros and cons of it, and how you do it and all those things. Second thing is like then at some point, and her question was, James, that did you sell it because you felt it was the right time to sell, or was there a concern on your end because of market's volatility that you felt that it was time to sell it off? And that is what her.
Okay, Mother, sorry, I forgot the second part, but again, a very good question, because I knew my capacity, because I was getting burnt out. This is Hawaii. And I was going to my work and went back to my business. I went home around 11, 11:30, 12 every single day. I didn't even see the beach. Even Sundays I lost. So I saw like, okay, my capacity is going to be only 4 years. So I told at fourth year, whether I make $1 billion or not, I'm selling this. I'm walking out. And that was my number one reason. And the second thing is, the day I started my business, I also knew that it is hard to sustain something that long when I hit the peak, because in project management, it will show you where you're going to hit your peak, especially in marketing. I teach marketing and business plan. It shows you where the business cycle, the marketing life cycle takes you to the peak. So when I hit the peak, I said, like, that's it. I know it's going to not sustain myself. So that's the
good
reason I
business
did that.
intuition you had it, that you are at the peak and it's better to get out of it than not any business insider knowledge that market is about to crash or anything like that. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm hoping, Shwetambari, that they have answered.
Yeah, sir, it did. So my next question, sir, is what risk should you plan to manage?
So this is something that I teach my students. The risk depends on your project. So one other thing is right from the beginning, you're working with compliance. That means the licensing, the government, the state, federal government, the United States. I'm sure in India you have the same. You have to think about the risk. What if something changes? What if the government changes? What if the local policy changes? Environmental regulation changes? That's a risk you got to think about. Second thing I would say is procurement. There's a risk in procurement all the time. Your manufacturers change. Your ability to buy some products are a risk. So you need to think about how do you always constantly have to have a second component. I teach my student about Porter's five force. In Porter's five force, he talks about duplication of process and also something related to supply. How you got to make sure you have a supplier negotiate. So one of the things is the risk. You also need to think about your suppliers. They're not going to be there all the time. Cost and price is a big variable. So, and maintaining a quality, and finally, because these are startups and small business, your customers are going to change constantly. They're going to always look at new things. So your risk has to be really anticipated in a what if analysis constantly throughout the period of time. So I would say that is something that has to become part and parcel of your project management repertoire, which you have in your bag.
So one last question, sir. Can you please elaborate on project management techniques?
Okay, so well, as I said, there are many, right? They use the waterfall, they use the agile, they use the lean, and so on and forth. There are a lot of techniques, but I've seen down the road and the time I've been in the business teaching and also as a student to write today, the four phases, the straight on linear movement or project plan technique is very helpful. It just puts everything in perspective. It knows what you have in hand and what you don't have in hand. The you can think about the agile you would go when you are doing IT and information technology, especially when you have to do the testing and so on and forth. So it all depends on where you are, what you have in your hand, and so on and forth. So my recommendation at this time would be to just to have the project management. The simple technique is to have 4 or 5 phases when you're starting a business. I'm just only addressing the part or if you are going to be a startup, and that's the technique I would use.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for addressing all the questions of the attendees. And on this note, I would like to thank all my speakers here. And thank you so much for giving such a wonderful session on how project management is. And thank you so much. This is a small token of appreciation from Shahananka Kachi Engineering College. And I would like all the three of you all to please accept it.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor. And it's great to have you guys given the opportunity to talk to all of you today.
And one more thing I'll add, that if any of your students are interested to reach out to either Dr. West or to Mr. Moses, please feel free to write to them. They are very easily available. And one surprising thing that people may like to know is James is from India, and he was born in India and moved to Hawaii at a very young age of 2. And since then, he's in the United States. So,
did you guys guess it?
So, fortunately, unfortunately, his only language he most familiar with is English, but he has the Indian roots. And one of these days, he and I plan to visit India, and hoping Peter will join us too. So, Peter, one of these days you have to pack up your clothes and not just fly to Chicago, but you have to fly
It'd be my pleasure.
James to Shahananka Kachi Engineering College.
Yes, sir. We all are waiting for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
So
Thank you very
thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Um,
Bye now.
Bye. See you guys. Thank you.